of course, when somebody does something like this, like what Gout Gout just did this week, there's a lot of things that he's doing right. But there's one thing in particular that really stands out the most about his strategy and what he's doing that really stands out above everything else. And it's really about his movement quality, is how his approach to striking the ground. This is something to talk about a lot with sprinters, and try to get them out of when they first start understanding what it's like to really put force in the ground. They understand that that's what causes you to sprint fast. That's what propels the body. The first thing most sprinters and most athletes want to do is they want to land and then press the ground. And that's the last thing. That's not what you really want your athletes to do. So before we get into what that means as far as why it looks like he floats off the ground, I'm going to point out just some universal things. And this is something that all these guys are like elite youth for the most part. But just point out what he does at the beginning. Even though his start doesn't look that great, he's doing a lot of great stuff at the start of this race. So first of all, the shin angle here, great shin angle, great low shin angle. Hips are not too high. Head is down in neutral position. Eyes back behind his hands towards the front of the blocks. As we move toward the start, boom, his hips are already down. So when it's time for the gun to go off, it's not a hip drop he doesn't have to drop his hips for his knees to get his shin angle, to get a horizontal shin angle. He's already got a low shin angle. So he pushes out, low shin angle. Pretty much, all these guys, maybe this guy on the end doesn't have a really good push of the low shin angle, but almost all these guys do. It's not the lowest shin angle you're ever going to see. But when you see his approach to the ground, when he strikes the ground, his foot well behind the hips. He's pushing back, back, back. So even though he doesn't get the greatest start here, his approach to the ground, again, behind the hips, second step. This is his first, second. Mind you, this guy's going to take 41 and a half steps to finish this race. This is elite stride length that he's going to produce. And he's doing this because he's using a lot of elasticity. He has very long limbs too, but he's using a lot of elasticity. Be interesting to see what steps the other guys beside him are on. 1, 2, 3. Pretty much everybody's in sync here, but still he's striking behind his hips. Foot behind the hips. This is on the third step. Fourth step, just under the hips. This is great horizontal projection. You can see this guy's ahead of him with his frequency, and he's going to get the best acceleration. This guy's going to reach his top speed faster than Gout Gout does, but Gout Gout keeps accelerating and gets to a higher top speed in the end. And how he's doing that is he is exerting most of his energy in the air. He's striking the ground. He's using limb speed through the air to strike the ground. If you look at this, there's zero heel drop as he strikes the ground. Boom, strikes the ground, no heel drop. No heel drop. This is no energy loss. So he's coming through, boom. All of the energy from here is getting transmitted through the fascia system, loaded up on his tendons, being released. He's exerting the force, his energy, to whipping his limbs to the ground. So the reason his knees are coming up so high is because he's not losing anything when he strikes the ground. When he strikes the ground, all of the energy is coming back up through his body, and it's propelling his hips, his leg back up, and his knees back up into a high level because of the force that he's putting in the ground. He's whipping through the air and bouncing off the ground, bounce, bounce, bounce. So his whole approach is to whip with high speed through the air, bounce off the ground, and that gives him that long stride length. It's very, very efficient. It's very elastic. So let's play this here for a minute. It's just to observe the whipping through the air, bouncing off the ground, whipping through the air, bouncing off the ground, whip, bounce, whip, bounce, whip, bounce. Every stride is a whip through the air and a bounce off the ground. This plays out the same way in the 200 meters, where you can see him beautifully whipping his legs through the air, bouncing off the ground, bounce, 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 bounce. It's a violent whip from the hip, causing the lower limb to move at a high speed through the air and bounce off the ground. This is a beautiful way that he strikes the ground, a beautiful approach to sprinting. Slow this down to half speed. You can really see the whip, bounce, whip, bounce, whip, bounce. He's got really tight limbs too. His upper body's tight. As he comes up, he doesn't keep it, he doesn't have like this, his forearm, like this guy right here, where his arm just stays open. He closes it, he brings it in front to make a short lever. Those are fine details, but the main thing, the overarching theme that you're seeing on him is that he's using an approach of whipping through the air and bouncing off the ground. It's extremely efficient. You gotta have very strong foot and ankle strength to make it work, so that you're not losing energy every time you collide with the ground. He's a light guy, clearly, so his foot and ankle strength for somebody who is heavier is going to have to be a lot stronger. This is beautiful.